Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us today. Next slide, please. My name is Andrea Hamilton-Vaughan, and I'm the Road Safety Officer at Orange and Cabonne Councils, and I'm the event chair of the Women in Road Safety Network of the College. Next, thank you. I'd like to acknowledge and pay our respects to the many First Nations of Australia who continue to be the sovereign custodians of the countries and their sovereignty of Maori and New Zealand. We acknowledge the ongoing traditional custodians of the lands on which we live, work and learn, and pay our respects to elders who have passed on the legacy of knowledge and culture to the future generations. May this sharing of knowledge through Mataranga Maori and Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander ways of knowing, being and doing guide you with wisdom and courage as it enhances our collective futures. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping before I introduce everyone. The webinar will be 60 minutes. The webinar is recorded and available from the College Webinar Library. Questions will be directly asked after each presentation. Next, please. There will be 5 minutes for questions. To ask for a question, use the Q&A at the bottom of the screen and type your question. My co-presenter, Acting Professor Sian Coppell, will be in charge of the questions. As we only have 5 minutes, she will pick the most appropriate. For general comments, you can click on the chat and type there. All right, thank you. Next. The Women in Road Safety Network welcomes you all today to connect, empower and celebrate women working across all areas of road safety. Through shared experiences, collaborative discussions and practical insights to embrace meaningful discussions in a changing sector. Today, 3 extraordinary women lead across the road safety sector from government, lead road safety agency and a non-government organisation. I'd like to also welcome my co-presenter, Acting Professor Sian Coppell. Our first speaker is the Honourable Jenny Aitchison, Minister for Roads and Regional Transport of the Government of New South Wales. The Minister comes from a transport background and while in opposition studied every aspect of the issues that contribute to roads, transport and road safety in New South Wales. Welcome a very busy Minister who's on the road and somehow managed to fit us in today. We are so grateful for your participation. Welcome, Minister.
Thanks so much, Andrea, and it's lovely to be here. I'm coming to you from Wonnarua country and I want to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to anyone on the call who is Aboriginal, a particular welcome and acknowledgement of you and custodianship of country wherever you are from. Look, I'm really honoured to be here and I was really grateful to be able to take up the offer to speak with you today. I guess it was really just about getting a bit of a background on, what I bring to my role and where, some of the experiences I've had that may be of use to others in a leadership role in roads and transport and road safety particularly. So I guess I didn't ever expect to be sitting here as a Minister for Roads in New South Wales and Regional Transport. I started my career in social justice coordination, in immigration and ethnic affairs, as it was back in those days in the federal government. But I've always had a strong commitment to social justice and seeing people really thrive in whatever roles they were in. I did some study in a postgraduate capacity in counselling and psychology. And so I've always been interested in, helping people, I guess, live their best lives. And so for me, when I was asked to take on the portfolio of transport and roads and in the regions, and then more recently roads across the whole state, I saw it as very much an opportunity to help people benefit from transport and roads as a social determinant of education, of health, of opportunity and jobs, and acknowledging their importance in resilience and also in inclusion. And I guess I took that role on just before Easter long weekend, and I knew from having been in opposition that it was going to be a bad weekend, in a sense, because every long weekend is a bad weekend in road safety. And so I asked the department to start, texting me or, notifying me in real time of tragedies on our road network and issues that were going to rouse concern, because I wanted to be in touch with what was going on. And it is still to this day very sobering when you get that text and you know that it's potentially someone has died on our roads. And I think as easy as it would be to not get the text and just, focus on the issues that people notice in the media and be responsive and reactive, I've always taken the view that we've got to be proactive if we're going to change things. So as a government, we've been trying to look at ways to reduce deaths on our roads and also to ensure that people have the best chance of survival. And I always talk about the 5 personal actions. I guess from my perspective, right through my career, it's always been about how can I, help in this particular issue or problem, whatever that problem is. Because it's very easy to say, oh, but it's a really big problem. It needs a lot of people to do a lot of different things and work together in a coordinated way. But if we all keep thinking that the problem's so big we can't do anything about it, then nothing will ever happen. So I've really focused on, those 5 personal steps we can all take, which is, not speeding. When we look at road crash statistics, 40% of crashes happen because somebody has sped. And then you look at fatigue, drugs and alcohol, being distracted by mobile phones or other things happening in the car, and then not wearing seatbelts. I mean, 40 people a year on average are dying because they're not wearing a seatbelt. So I figure that's really, for me, a big focus, is to try and make sure that we give people those tools. In addition to that, I also acknowledge the work that people like Andrea are doing. Her work as a road safety officer is one part of it, but also her power nap promotional videos has been really something that's made a big difference. We know that fatigue has been a really leading cause, particularly in single driver crashes and in the heavy vehicle industry. And she does a lot of work with road freight, New South Wales and that space. So that's something that really has to be commended. And then the other thing we're doing is looking at the road infrastructure. So the Towards Zero Safer Roads program, where we're upgrading state roads and highways and making sure that they are better, facilities, I guess, or better infrastructure, but then also providing funding to council. So there are some practical, concrete ways we can make the roads better and safer, particularly for the fatigue. One of the things around having those fences, the wider centre median lines, the rumble strips or audio tactile markings on the sides of the road, then all help to keep drivers in their lane, reduce the risk of head-on, which is a massive issue with fatigue. But yeah, I'm not sure if you want me to talk about something else particularly, Andrea, than what I've sort of spoken on there. But I guess that's sort of the lens that I bring to this role. And I think that's probably the main sort of point. If maybe it's people want to ask questions, is that all right?
Yeah, that's wonderful, of course. Yes, we would love for you to answer some questions. I'm looking at the Q&A, but I don't see any questions yet. I wonder whether any of the other panel members have any questions for the Minister? Tracey, yes. Oh.
I was just, while we're on the topic of women in road safety, thank you for your talk just now. I'm just wondering how you find the role in terms of being a woman with a lot of obviously male colleagues, etc., in terms of getting ideas and movement across for change.
Look, it's an interesting question, because having come from, so in between my work in social justice and parliamentary life, which is also pretty male-dominated, I worked in the bus industry as a coach tour operator, and I was CEO, and I used to be one of the few women that would go to a lot of those meetings. And it's always been challenging. I think the transport industry, though, although it's got a persona of a pretty kind of macho industry, I think because there's a lot of family businesses, particularly in freight, but even in the bus side of things or coach side, there tends to be an understanding that women are really, in a lot of those cases, running the businesses. So the men might be the ones that turn up to conferences at times, but the women are actually doing the work of managing them and looking after critical incident safety sort of things. So I fell really into doing a lot of that work when I was in the bus industry. I got involved in critical incident safety management there because, you know, I was just interested in it as something that made sense to me, because I wanted all my crew to come home safe. I wanted our passengers to be safe. So that, I think it's a natural kind of fit. And particularly, I guess, if you look at the risk profile for men and women, it's something where in transport, women would probably be more focused on the safety side than not. But I think it is harder in one sense to get the message across, because you've got to really speak to often a cohort that's the leading risk takers that don't feel like they can relate to as easily. So it is a bit challenging in that way. And that's why I really try to focus, like particularly on the speeding as an example. People will tell me, like, you know, particularly that kind of demographic, 40, 50-year-old men, and say, oh, you know, but I'm a good driver, it doesn't matter for me. But when you sort of say to them, well, 160 odd people have died this year, I think it's about 163 or something at the moment, and 40% of them would be walking around today if no one was speeding, then like it's a number that they can relate to. And often, for example, when I'm talking in Parliament, again, it's a very macho culture and you're trying to engender change. Yeah. I'll often speak to, you know, there's 93 members of Parliament, there's maybe another 40 or 50 in the gallery. That is the number of people who died on our roads. And to really make them think about those numbers as people and really personalise it for them. But I think also some of that conversation is difficult because you're trying to explain to them it's not a reflection on your skill level to say you need to go slower. It's saying not everybody has got the same level of skill here. And if you don't leave room for people to make a mistake, then you're going to be part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. And I think men are, I mean, certainly in the work that I do, which is child road safety, looking at fatality statistics, a lot of males are usually represented in those numbers from quite a young age. And being such high risk takers, it's just sort of part of the way their brain is wired. And so, you know, I guess it is really important to get that message across to the men in our society.
Yeah, I think so. And I think like
how we do it, you know, it's the tricky part is getting the right strategy around that.
Yeah, Transport's just started something over, I think it was in Road Safety Week, where we're sharing stories of people who, and encouraging people to share their own stories. And that can be really powerful. So there's a young woman, Heidi, who is a motorcyclist, and she was cleaned up in a T-bone. And she talks about the very, very intrusive impact that's had on her every single day life, you know, just how hard life is with her disabilities as a result of that crash of getting around. And that's a really powerful presentation, which I know really changes it for people. There was also someone at the last year's, so 2024's National Road Safety Week launch for New South Wales. And that was really interesting. That was a fellow who was in a small town, and we know that 70% of crashes occur, you know, in regions. And he was actually hit by a car from someone he knew. And so, and the police officer that came to the crash also knew him. And I think sometimes the survivors of those really traumatic crashes can get the story across because, you know, the death figures are bad. It's 340 people died on the roads last year. That's a terrible number. And every single one of those people, that's a family that's in trauma. But
Totally.
16,000 plus of people who've suffered significant trauma. And it's not like you get up and I had a crash, I had an injury and I'm up walking around. Like I saw that gentleman that we saw last year just a month ago, and he's walking better. I could tell that. And, we said, like, it's great, you're walking better than you are now. But that's 2 years after his crash. And people need to understand it's the long-term recovery. And I think that for men might be a better sort of motivator, because they see it as, I take a risk now, I'm severely limited in what I do later.
Yes.
I've got one question from the audience, if you don't mind, Minister. So this is from Rob. He said that there's a lot of focus on speeding, but fatigue is also a major factor, as you've acknowledged. So there's a lot of education about speeding and the risks associated with that, but maybe there's not as much education or understanding of the risk associated with fatigue. How do you think that can be changed?
I think more targeted is better, and also probably we need to get better at communicating that message. I mean, Andrea's power nap is great. That's one way it's getting out there. But I know I was out west over the Easter long weekend doing some road visits with Roy Butler, the member for Barwon, who's, electorate's the size of Germany. It's fatigue is a big thing out there. And I stumbled across a campaign that we do out of our Western region at that time of the year, which is around hunting. And, you often see hunters, for example, going out all weekend and then driving long distances to go home. And they'd actually specifically targeted that. So I think there's more we can do there to really make people think about it, because particularly you look at that cohort, young people going out hunting, not thinking about the driving side of it. They're just excited. They're out with their mates. They stay up, spotlighting. And so I think it's just trying to reprioritise. And again, over holiday breaks, we do talk about that as well, because often people on those long weekends, etc., are leaving work. They might work a bit longer so they can take an extra day, so they're tired before they even start. So it is part of the conversation. The other thing is providing adequate rest stops, and that's something that we are trying to do in conjunction with the federal government, not just for heavy vehicle drivers, but also for light vehicle drivers. And, it's a difficult conversation with things like caravans, for example. Sometimes people talk about, why the caravan is in the truck stops, rest areas. Yes, they shouldn't just go there for a holiday, but if they are having a fatigue issue, they should also rest. So it is trying to balance that. So that's why we're trying to put more of those stops in and around where people need them.
Wonderful. I'm mindful of your time, Minister. So, were you going to say the same thing, Andrea?
Yes, sorry.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm mindful of your time. Thank you so much for joining us and prioritising road safety as you do. And we're thrilled that you've been here, and thank you for all the hard work that you do.
Thank you so much. And thanks for all the hard work you do. And it's really great to be part of a seminar like this, which is actually promoting such an important message. And if there's any other outcomes of it, I'm very happy to hear about them if there's ways we can help. Thank you.
Minister.
Thanks so much. See you.
Thank you, Minister. The Minister has to leave us now because I believe she's got other engagements. And thank you once again for joining us. Our next speaker is Miss Tracey Slatter, the CEO of the Transport Accident Commission of Victoria. It's one of Australia's leading road safety agency with groundbreaking road safety strategies which have resonated across the world. Ms. Slatter comes from a public utilities background and local government background, and we're very excited to have her here today to share her insights to her career and her work at the TAC. Thank you, Tracey.
Thank you. Just checking you can all see that screen.
Yes, we can.
Great. Well, thank you very much for inviting me today. It's quite a change in contrast to the Minister, who I thought was really, really interesting. It was great to hear how knowledgeable and passionate she is about road safety. My presentation today, it takes more of a slant on leadership in the road safety sector, and I'll just share some of my insights and learnings about that, which I hope is of value to others. I do want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that I'm on today, and that's the Wadawurrung people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. A little bit about the Transport Accident Commission. So we are one of the plethora of agencies and people in Victoria who are working together to try and create a safer future on our road network. And the TAC was formed in 1986 under legislation. And really, in the almost 40 years that we've operated, we haven't had to change a lot in terms of our organisational model. It's a great model. We have two main roles. The first role is to promote road safety and prevent lives lost on the roads. And the second role is an insurance role, where those who are severely injured on our roads receive our support for as long as they need to help get their lives back on track. And of course, for some people who are very, very severely injured, that's their entire life. And so we have around about a $2 billion annual budget, and we spend most of that on supporting people to recover or be supported following a transport accident. So our whole organisation is very, very committed to the objectives of road safety, and we invest a lot of funds into making Victorians safer on our roads, but we do that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, to help reduce the costs of our scheme on the community. Now, I thought I'd talk a little bit about my journey, starting with an interesting photo. Most of you may not know where this is, but this is where I grew up, in a small town, well, actually outside, 16 kilometres outside of a small town in north central Victoria called Boort. And I did a little Google search of things to do in Boort, just to see whether anything's changed since I grew up there. And the great fun activity in Boort is to go to Simply Tomatoes, which is a tomato farm. So I assure you there are more things to do in Boort than that. But one of the reasons I share this slide is because I think as a leader, it's really important to understand where you come from, those values that you're brought up with. And we do always do an acknowledgement of country. And one of the things I've learned from Aboriginal people is they're acknowledging country, they're acknowledging their heritage, where they are from and what has made them who they are. And I think any leader, no matter what level you are in an organisation, it's really helpful to be grounded in that. And since that time, as Andrea mentioned, I've worked across a range of public sector organisations, in local government, in water utility, in the public service itself, and two stints at the TAC, one as head of claims several years ago, and now as the CEO. I think that breadth of experience has really helped me to understand a lot about leadership. And as leaders, I think what we want to do is to achieve things. And I think especially in roles where your technical expertise has been the foundation of your work, sometimes it can be challenging making that transition from being a technical expert to being a leader. And sort of worse than that, sometimes it can be frustrating because you have all of the technical information, but you don't understand why it isn't being taken up. Why aren't the decision makers saying yes to all of this? It's so obvious. You've got the evidence, you've done the research, you've got the answers, and yet it can be very, very frustrating to actually get that translation to people going, okay, I want to do this, I want to invest in it, I want to make it happen by the decision maker. So One of the things that I've always tried to do in my career is to help people who have that deep technical understanding and knowledge and expertise to be able to get the outcomes that they want by building the leadership side of their capability. And, you know, there's a gazillion books written on leadership, and I'm really not pretending to be an expert on it, but I do try to simplify sometimes what I think can be overly complicated. And I have boiled down leadership into 3 key areas of focus. One is understanding the risks. One is understanding the strategy that you want to put in place. And the other is building the culture that enables those risks to be managed and the strategy to be implemented. So I'll talk a little bit about each of those aspects with some examples. So first of all, let's talk about the TAC's role in road safety and thinking about risks. So the Minister talked earlier about the New South Wales experience, and Victoria's experience is very similar. We have 143 people who, as of today, have lost their lives on Victorian roads, and the same factors that the Minister talked about are the factors that contribute to those deaths here, as they do right across the world. And one of the things that we are grappling with, and the Minister talked about both these items, there's a question about fatigue and some discussion about speed. People, when they are driving, really lose context of the impact that they can have in an accident. And so one of the things that we have been doing is really, and doing a lot of this work with MUARC, is really understanding what the impact of speed really is in a tangible way, and communicating that. And what this research has shown is that any speed of a vehicle faster than 30 kilometres an hour means that the chances of a pedestrian, if they're hit, surviving is negligible. Similarly, in a 50 kilometre side impact collision with another vehicle, the chances of survival very low, same at 70 kilometres. So these facts are presented as risks for creating a safer system. And similarly, research that we've also commissioned has shown that when you drive on less than 5 hours sleep, you're 4 times more likely to have a crash. So getting the information about the risks, and look, risk management's a huge area, but I'm just touching on it today, I think is a helpful way of framing the building of a case for change. And this approach by the TAC has proven successful over time, and many of you will have seen an infographic very similar to this at times. But as I mentioned, the TAC has been in existence since 1986, and prior to that, the Victorian government took a very brave approach with bold policy decisions that dramatically saved lives in Victoria. And that started with mandatory seatbelts in 1970, one of the first jurisdictions to do so. But since then, compounding on that initiative has been a series of initiatives which together have really significantly reduced the number of people who have lost their lives on the roads. And the Victorian government has a commitment and a strategy to halve the lives lost by 2030 in their 10-year strategy, and also to see 0 deaths by 2030. And by 2050. And last year, the Victorian government launched the Road Safety Strategy and Action Plan 2. So on this chart is the first one, but last year our government launched the second one of those strategies. And we believe some of the success of being able to make the case for those policy interventions here in Victoria has been the adoption of the safe system approach. Again, many of you will be familiar with this, but again, it provides that opportunity to talk about both the risks and the strategies that you can put in place on our roads to build a culture of road safety in Victoria. And people will be familiar with this, but whenever we're putting together an investment case for change, we do so through this systems approach. So we don't just say, oh, how can we make the road safer, or how can we change people's behaviour? We say, how do we make roads safer? How do we address safer speeds? How do we address safer vehicles? And how do we address safer people, safer behaviours? So all of our work addresses that in an integrated way, and we always are presenting that. And recently this has, as I said, become a really binding principle for us. And it recognises that as humans, we are prone to making mistakes. It's not to say that we shouldn't all be driving carefully, and I totally agree with the Minister. We need to drive at a safe speed. We need to not be tired, not impacted by drugs and alcohol, and driving in a safe vehicle on safe roads. But we are prone to, even when we're doing all of those things, sometimes lapses of concentration. So having safe roads, safe speeds and safe vehicles can be a further protection when the behaviour does let you down. One of the other things that we always do and which we think is effective in helping to get decisions made is to not just look at it through lives lost, but through the financials. Now, this is not an actual financial. We've just mocked this up for illustrative purposes. But we do detailed modelling of all of the initiatives that we're proposing in order to translate that into a reduction on the insurance side of the business. And so we really see our role as investing in change that will reduce the lives lost and the serious injuries, but so that we reduce the costs of compensation to Victorians, which is an objective enshrined in our legislation. And we've been so successful at that our premiums in Victoria have never risen by more than CPI since that 1986 commencement. So really that's helping to show sort of risk into strategy. And then there is culture. Within an organisation, I think all organisations are imperfect, but some organisations are more imperfect than others. And the role of leaders is to help organisations to be more efficient, more effective, more achieving. And they're easy things to say. And even if you understand the risks and you understand your strategy, how do you build a culture where the people in your organisation want to turn up with the most constructive approach every single day, giving their absolute best and striving to make things better as opposed to just turning up? And one of the things that I've always developed each time I've been in an organisation is how to build a culture that is highly constructive. Now, we use the human synergistics tool, but there are a number of tools out there. And what I'm just sharing here is how all of our people have described the current culture at the TSC. This is a couple of years old now. And you can see there that the blue behaviour is, the blue colours are meant to be the more constructive behaviours. The green is passive defensive and the red is a more aggressive defensive behaviours. And the ideal state, and again, this is our own people describing by filling out the sorts of attributes that they'd like to see, have described a highly constructive organisation. And so we have put in place leadership programs and performance initiatives and a whole range of integrated strategies to try and help shift our culture more towards that ideal state. And it will take, be a multi-year program. But also as an executive, we take that seriously about our own role, and we workshop together the kind of executive and leadership team that we want to be. And as part of that, we've identified the behaviours that we want to turn up with every single day and hold ourselves accountable for in order to be that really high performing team for our organisation. And finally, that culminates in our strategy, which brings these elements together, where we have identified 4 goals that we want to achieve as an organisation, what our aspirations are, which are very much stretch, high-level aspirations, North Stars. We've defined what success looks like and how we're going to get there, and of course, a lot more detail sits behind it. But I think having a strategy that resonates with your people, with the community, that you can get behind, is absolutely crucial to driving and achieving change. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracey. That was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. There is a question for you. You mentioned road safety. Oh, this is from Anonymous. You mentioned road safety behaviours as part of your safe system approach. In your opinion, how can you change people's behaviour to prevent mistakes and accidents?
So look, I think we're all human. So until we're in driverless cars on perfect roads, we are still relying on humans, and humans will make mistakes. But in terms of the behaviours, when I talk about culture, it's not only a culture within our organisation. Our ambition is to create a culture of road safety among Victorians. So what we've observed over decades, I think, is societies that are less likely, or communities, if you like, or people that are less likely to do something simply because a person in authority says that's what you should do. Some of us will still do that, but not everybody. Most people are more influenced by their family, their friends, and their peers. So while we run campaigns through all the different channels of media, one of the things that we invest strongly in is our partnerships with a range of grassroots organisations across Victoria. So, for example, AFL Victoria, AFL's just massive in Victoria. We partner with netball and football clubs, 1,000 netball and football clubs right across Victoria, and they are given a reward. It's called the Clubs Reward Program. They're given a reward for promoting road safety in their clubs, in their communities. And that's just an example, I think, of how we're trying to not be the only voice, but to be the investor in voices of road safety. But the other evidence that, in terms of what informs our campaigns and our ads, is that we know, as the Minister said, that people won't necessarily change their behaviour when they see an ad because they think it won't happen to them. Because, as tragic as it is that 143 people have died on our roads, now there are 6 million Victorians. So, sometimes it can be the case that you don't know someone who's died on our roads, and you might think reasonably the odds are that it won't happen to you. So we focus on enforcement, because the chances of getting a fine are very, very high if you speed or aren't wearing a seatbelt or are distracted with mobile phones and the like. And we find that people do believe that if they will get a fine, they don't want to get a fine, so they change their behaviour.
Yep. I completely agree. As a behavioural scientist, I think that we have an optimism bias. Everyone thinks that they're safer than the average road user. Everyone thinks that their skills are better than the average driver. Everyone thinks that their car is safer than the average car. So I think that there's some lessons that we can learn in other public health areas, whether it be sunscreen, like we see this now with children. no one goes to the park without wearing sunscreen or a hat. It's just ingrained. It's in the culture, as you were saying. And so I think that we can use some of those learnings and apply them to the road safety space where it's just unacceptable to do some of these things. But I think you absolutely need to couple that, as you said, with enforcement and making sure those other areas of the system are up to scratch in terms of safe roads, safe infrastructure, having the safest car that you possibly can. So I completely agree. Another question for you, Tracey, if you don't mind. This is from Tasha. So she said, as a female leader, what challenges have you experienced and what are some of the tactics you have had to use to address these?
It's always an interesting question because my experience is only as a female leader, so I have got nothing to compare it with. But I do think that many women underestimate their capabilities, and for whatever reason, I've always been prepared to have a go and have a high aspiration, whether that be in terms of a role I'm going for or whether it be for the aspiration of the organisation or the area that I'm working in. So one of the things that I would encourage is to be aspirational, to be ambitious, not ambitious for the sake of it, but ambitious to make a difference and to have a positive impact. And we can understand people are different. Being male and female is only one of the differences. There are introverts and extroverts. There are people who drive things hard and people who seem more gentle in their approach. And the great thing about leadership is, though none of those things are better or worse as a leader, any of those attributes can take you forward as a leader. So don't be intimidated. If someone seems more confident than you, it could just be that they're giving that impression. They may or may not be more confident than you. So, yeah, I think you just got to go for it.
I've got a question, Tracey. Can I have a question?
You sure can. You're the boss. You can.
In my dreams, I'm the boss. Tracey, point to point. You talked about enforcement. I've had the occasion to drive down the Hume to Melbourne quite a few times where there's point to point. And it's absolutely magical the way that X amount of drivers, and all of them are driving to the speed limit. It's so successful. I don't know what your statistics are showing you. Are you going to roll that out further onto your other major networks?
Yes, we agree with you that point to point is very effective, and particularly now that some of the cars are giving you warnings when there's a fixed speed camera in place. So I think camera technology is an area of innovation and where we can really make a significant impact, because people don't want to get caught, but you won't get caught if you're doing the right thing. So there's a sort of a moral alignment to it, but I certainly agree with you about point-to-point cameras.
Thank you.
I'm mindful of time. Thank you so much, Tracey. I really enjoyed your presentation and thanks for those insightful answers as well. We'll have to get you back and get you to talk a little bit more, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you, Tracey. I hope you're going to join us at the Australasian College of Road Safety Conference in Perth or in the following years, because I'm sure many of us would love to hear more from you. Our final speaker for today is someone I really admire. She comes from the non-government organisational area. Her name is Miss Michelle McLaughlin. She's the CEO of the Little Blue Dinosaur Foundation. From tragedy to action, Michelle has developed an intervention strategy to engage with all carers of small children. And I can speak personally to say that her knowledge and the way she's transferred that knowledge to local government areas has helped me save the lives of many children. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Andrea, and hello, everyone. I'm feeling really honoured today to be able to be asked to speak at the Women in Road Safety webinar. Just a little warning, obviously, my presentation does speak about child death. However, you're all in the road safety business, so you understand and you know tragically that children die through road trauma. So if I can just move to the next slide. This is my son, Tom, here that you can see. And the Little Blue Dinosaur Foundation was established in the latter part of 2014 in honour of Tom, who sadly and tragically died at the age of 4 in a pedestrian motor vehicle accident on a family holiday in January of 2014. So since then, Little Blue Dinosaur's mission has been to educate and assist in protecting child pedestrians from the extreme danger. Obviously, that's associated with roadways, and I'll add here driveways and car parks, and obviously the motor vehicle movements. We work with actually at 79 LGAs. We just struck a partnership up with the Mitchell Shire Council in Victoria in the last month. So 79 LGAs across 5 Australian states, and we're implementing a very cost-effective child pedestrian road safety signage and media campaign to obviously help prevent fatalities and also serious injuries for very vulnerable child road users. Next. So obviously, the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare has identified the most common cause of death of children aged 1 to 14 as the land transport accidents. And certainly the BIDA data backs that up. For 2014 to 2024, it's also identifying child road trauma deaths as the leading cause of death of children aged 1 to 14 in Australia. And we, as a not-for-profit organisation, identified a gap in road safety education, particularly around the busy holiday times. Obviously, we lost our son during a busy holiday time, and that's a time when families are out of their regular routines and known environments. And these are areas that get population spikes. So within a week, I certainly am aware of the one particular LGA in the mid-coast. I've been told by their RSO that within a week, their population spikes 3 times its normal amount. And so that leads to obviously pressure on infrastructure and obviously can lead to an increase in the occurrence of crashes involving young children. Next slide. So numerous studies document the death of a child as being the worst trauma a human being can experience, and I can attest to that. It is absolutely earth-shattering, and you are never, ever the same person again, and the ripple effect does flow on into your children and your wider family. So bereaved parents are obviously at risk of increased high risk of depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Suicide, sadly, panic disorders, immune and cardiovascular disease, as well as cancers have been documented in that. And certainly in many instances of child bereavement, the grief can manifest into dependence on drugs, alcohol, breakdown of the family unit, and drugs also can include prescriptive medications as well. And just overall general financial hardship and social isolation. And sadly, not in my case, but in certainly people I have met through child road trauma, their marriages and their families have broken up. Next slide. So our coastal and regional towns experience the population spikes at holiday times, which I've mentioned. So as I said, consequently, increased vehicle and pedestrian activity coupled with limited roadway infrastructure. And I mean, I know that's the beauty of these places and why we're attracted them to get away from the city, but it doesn't mean that we don't have to, or we should not worry essentially about just making the awareness to parents and families that it is a time where you may be tending to be a bit more relaxed and your child is out of their normal environment, and we need to just remind people of the critical messaging for motorists: slow down, there's kids around, and the big one is hold my hand. And that really needs to happen up until a child is, they say, 10 years of age, and I believe that to certainly be true, having witnessed over the last 11 years a number of demonstrations by young children that it is very much needed that they have their parent supervising and holding their hands. Next slide, thanks. We also work with the local government areas. Obviously, a lot of beautiful recreational areas and parks or playgrounds are located next to busy roadways. In fact, I once went to a launch in Junee with the council there, and the adjacent roadway was 80 kilometres per hour. And it was certainly a case for having the playground fenced, and also having the hold my hand signage there on both front and back of the gate too, as a reminder to the parent to make sure that they are in fact remembering to hold their child's hand as they step back out into you know, areas which can be life-changing in a moment, and often have, as Tracey mentioned about the speed limits, suburban default speed limits around me. I live in the Northern Beaches area of Sydney, and they're mostly 50 kilometres per hour. And, you know, it's we all know what happens, that it is a great and higher possibility that we can be killed if we hit at that speed. And certainly little children who are fragile, you know, they can be killed in low speed accidents as well in the driveway. So it's something that needs to be avoided. So again, we've partnered with 60 LGAs now, just with the Hold My Hand playground signage, and some of those obviously participate in both our campaigns. Next slide, thanks. And this is just an example, because I really strongly believe in collaboration. I've never thought for 1 minute since I started on this path and journey that I could ever do this on my own. Australia is a massive country. There's 537 LGAs. I've worked a lot through getting grant funding through the New South Wales state government, and also the federal government, which I'll talk about shortly. But predominantly, I have a lot of councils, as you can see on board. We've got over a 50% coverage through New South Wales. And it's been step by step, obviously, me contacting the councils, me building credibility. My background was in New South Wales Health. I was a registered nurse for 20 years. So I'm very much interested in you know, evidence-based practice and research. That really matters to me in terms of the campaign that we lead, that it has the credibility and the backing, you know, and the collaboration. So we can certainly outreach, and we need to grow more in, as you can see, so over in Western Australia, Northern Territory particularly. But it's all about the collaboration. Next slide, thanks. So certainly we have reached our target audiences, and over the years I've met all kinds of stakeholders, from the government to police, media, schools, Excuse me, I needed a sip of water.
That's okay.
And we want to just the importance of modelling safe road behaviour and working towards zero through our personal experience. And we've certainly been successful with getting grants to help with that. Sorry, everyone.
That's okay.
Next slide. And these are just some lovely photos of the part that backs up our signage in the community. Is very important to get the message out through the media and get people's awareness built. And as you can see, we've had some really great times involving school students at launches, police, different types of signage, like up on the bus station there at Port Macquarie. And my favourite day was at the Cessnock Zoo. And as you can see, that's my husband with the snake. I absolutely refuse to hold the snake, but we have had some really great, fun, enjoyable times, and we've really got the engagement of the local government, and it's a fantastic thing, I can say. Next slide. And this is also another state government initiative that certainly came out of Tom's coronial case, because I did want to highlight that, you know, holiday areas and the differences in the infrastructure, for example, you know, some areas not having footpaths, not having curb and gutter. It can be confusing for little children, and being out of their home environment, and just to bring that awareness. So we worked with Transport for New South Wales and developed this resource called Out and About with Sophie and Tom. And there were many other stakeholders there that I've listed, but because I'm losing my voice at the minute, I won't go into them, but it was certainly a very collaborative project, and we loved being a part of that. And the best thing about it was that it got out to 2,300 New South Wales schools, reaching over 500,000 students. So I thought that was a really great outcome. Next slide. And one part of the work that I've loved over the last 11 years was that Little Blue Dinosaur was successful recipients of the 2021 Road Safety Innovation Grant via the National Office of Road Safety. And I was, as a result of that, able to work with academics from the University of New South Wales. One lady in particular is Emeritus Professor Anne Williamson, who's been an absolutely wonderful mentor to me. And we worked really well. As I mentioned, I was a registered nurse, and for a number of years, I used to be involved at the hospital researching biologic agents and actually working with drug companies and with patients. So as I said, I do like the evidence base. And with this particular study, it was a pilot project. So first we went through all the sort of coronial data through each state. We had to apply, which was quite a process in applying to get access to that, and then looked at you know, areas where there had been higher incidences of child fatalities, particularly focusing on pedestrians. And we were able to identify 7 LGAs who, and there were more than 7, but the funding just allowed for the 7 to work with us. And we implemented utilisation of our assets, our hold my hand messaging, some particularly well-written brochures about child and parent carer education in relation to children having limited cognitive and physical and perceptual abilities around roadways. So education was a big part of it, and 70 preschools were involved in that across New South Wales, Victoria, and in Queensland. So we were able to test knowledge of parents and carers with one of these survey monkeys, and it was interesting then to then come along through about the 3-week point and then again at the 6-week point, which actually proved that just by putting in a few $100s into each preschool in highlighting education for the parents and including the little students, that we made a significant difference to their understanding and knowledge about critically the holding of the hand or the restraint of the child to keep them safe, because it's just that split second, as our family tragically learned. And honestly, I couldn't have been a bigger helicopter mother, but it can just, child road trauma does not discriminate regardless of education, social class, or any of those things. You can be the smartest person in the world and still it can be that split second. So it was great to see that our findings highlighted what we've been saying from the very beginning of doing these campaigns, that core message, which is a government endorsed message too. And like Sian was saying before, I always, when I speak to parents, I say, well, when you're out in the community, why not hold your child's hand? It's as important as putting a seatbelt on them in the car. We wouldn't not do that because it's been ingrained into us since the 1970s, like Tracey's presentation mentioned. This is what we need to get out, and it's really, really important looking through some of these tragic fatality numbers across Australia. It shouldn't be happening, and it's preventable. Next slide. And again, this is me in the media at Christmas time. We leverage the media. I think it's important just to get our messaging out at those key times, particularly as holiday times are coming up. And like the minister said, you know, Easter time, for example, Christmas holidays. I mean, there's all sorts of tragic things happening on our roadways, but our particular focus has been just to remind parents and carers when they are on holidays to be vigilant. Next, please. So obviously there are many benefits to collaborating with us, and like I say, we have you know, worked so proactively and diligently, and obviously having the personal story at many schools, I've delivered those messages, and I believe parents do relate to me and they do take that on board. So, you know, it's quite a cost-effective and sustainable multilingual. We've also done multilingual campaigns with the City of Casey, which has also been great fun to provide those signages, and really important for community engagement that involves every person, every parent, no matter what their background is. And yeah, we've over the years, I have developed quite a bit of experience working with the governments on all levels, and I certainly personally have got a lot out of that. And I guess being a woman, I did note at the beginning it was very difficult, but the cause is so important to me. And, you know, we're talking about saving lives, and I guess that runs in parallel with my nursing background. I've always been doing that in a way, but now I just do it through a different channel. But you know, I just want to spare, and so does my husband, parents from losing precious children in Australia. So that's me for today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Well done.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to look and see if there's any questions. We don't have any questions. Andrea, did you have a question for Michelle?
I think one of the most important things from Michelle's work is that it's an intervention strategy. She's not saying, let's keep our children safe, which she is saying, of course, but she's adding the steps, the actions that can be put in place to prevent tragedy. And in this particular case, it's the holding the hand. And I've had parents tell me, thank you, and they're talking about Michelle, not me. Thank you for sharing that information, because I asked my child to hold my hand and my child, you know, doesn't want to do it. But because some other people are saying it outside of the family unit, they are accepting it more, and it's terribly important. I think it's a grassroots program. I know we have showier programs in the non-government organisation area which raise awareness, but this is a particular program that is an intervention that can prevent, by certain actions, fatal and injuries in children. Well done, Michelle.
Thank
Well
you.
done. And it's free. You just hold your child's hand. Like it's a free
Exactly.
intervention. And I think to sort of bring it full circle, it is about changing the culture and the norms and just making it very normal that you hold your child's hand until 10 or 12, you know, when their frontal lobe has developed enough so that they can anticipate or assess the risks. So I think it's a brilliant program. I really want to see it rolled out in some of those other states. I'm very upset that there's only 3% in Victoria.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, I know you are. I want some of those LGAs to come and do that.
Well, I think that the thing is too, is just that it's really become aware to us through that research that parents don't know they have to hold their child's hand till 10 because of all that frontal and developmental stuff. A lot of people don't know that. They just don't. And I've tested it in rooms where I've said, keep your hand up. How long are you holding your child's hand till? And most hands are down by about age 7. And it's evidenced every day with children around me walking to and from schools who are well below the age of 7, 8 even, or scootering or bike riding, not a parent in sight. And like I said, local default limit, 50k an hour.
Exactly. I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to hand over to Andrea to close everything off.
All right. Thank you very much, Michelle. I'd like to thank our presenters today, the Honourable Jenny Aitchison, Minister for Regional Roads and Transport in New South Wales, Miss Tracey Slatter, the CEO of the Transport Accident Commission, and Miss Michelle McLaughlin, CEO of the Little Blue Dinosaur Foundation. I'd also like to thank my co-host, Acting Professor Sian Capel from the Monash University Accident Commission, and a lady that's not here, but Leslie Tipping from the Australasian College of Road Safety, who stepped in to help us bring this together. I'd also like to thank the record number of people who have registered and participated today. Thank you for supporting the Women in Road Safety network. We will have further presentations each month. And if you're going to the Australasian College of Road Safety Conference in Perth, don't forget to come to our workshop. It's going to be sensational. Thank you, everyone. Drive safely and stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.